Hi, welcome all to our session on how to get the most out of Viva Engage. In this session, we'll be looking at some of the key insights from our 2025-26 Viva Engage Benchmarking Report, which I'm sure you all know and have read cover to cover already. But we're going to show you some of these insights on how to get your people engaged and really cement Viva Engage as the primary channel of communications for your staff. Let's go to the next slide now, Cai.
Yes, coming. There we go.
Beautiful. Bit of dramatics there. I'd like to acknowledgement of country. I acknowledge I am hosting this webinar from the lands of the Kaurna people. I also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which you all work today and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people participating in this webinar. I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging and celebrate the diversity of Aboriginal peoples and their ongoing cultures and connections to the lands and waters of Australia. Now we can get into some introductions. I'm so happy to present some of the presenters that we have here on today's session. So of course, I'm joined by Cai Kjaer, SWOOP Analytics CEO, Sharon Dawson, the Director of Communications at SWOOP, along with Dr. Lawrence Lee, who unfortunately couldn't be here today, but they are the co-authors of this report and the mega minds behind all the data. So we're really excited to share some of those insights with you today. Hand straight over to Sharon for some of the data.
Oh, thank you, Fran. So we'll go straight into the data. But firstly, just as a bit of an overview about our benchmarking findings in this year's report, we've really seen a shift in the way Viva Engage has been used over the past 5 years. So think about if this applies to how you're seeing Viva Engage being used in your organisation as well. But during the COVID-19 pandemic, we found people were flocking to Viva Engage and they were connecting and communicating with colleagues. But in the 5 years since, this is where we've seen the shift. There's been an increase in Viva Engage being used as an official corporate communications channel. So in this webinar, we're going to dive into what that means for you and how you can take some simple actions to cement Viva Engage as your key enterprise comms channel and maybe back to a little bit more of that connecting and communication with colleagues. So we're also going to address the issue of information and noise overload across Viva Engage and other internal communications channels. And we're going to give you free access to a tool we think will be a bit of a game changer. So in this year's report, we've analysed the real life data across almost 17 million Viva Engage interactions from almost 3 million employees across 5,758 Viva Engage communities and 73 organisations. So interestingly, we can tell you from the data that Viva Engage is actually a key enterprise comms channel. And as I said, we've got the data to prove it. So I'm going to hand over to Cai now to explain a little bit more about what the data told us.
Yes, it's thank you, Sharon. It's actually interesting to see. It's like a horse race. You know, we can see that it's optional, and some users ended up. I think we ended up at 50% for that one. So let us take you through some of the data. Actually, what's interesting is that we found out that 31.6%. Now, this is an average, and there's of course. That's the thing with averages. It is an average, but 31.6% of people using Viva Engage have actively used it, like posted, replied, or like something. And that's actually up from 28.7 last year. So we are seeing quite a lot of use. And remember, this is not reading. This is people actively doing something. And we think that's actually, it's incredible that it becomes so high, and which is why Sharon was saying that it's become quite an essential part of the comms channel mix. We've also seen this year something that a number that really have risen over the previous year was how often people are now mentioning someone in a post. You know, that's when you use the add mention and you type the name of one or multiple people. That is now up at 15.3% of posts are mentioning someone. And that's actually really good. We're going to talk about that a little bit later, why that's actually a really good thing, because it draws people into conversations. So I have some more numbers to share with you on that. The other thing that's been interesting to watch is that the people tend to participate in more than one community. We have a metric in SWOOP we call the multi-group participation, and that is also increasing. And that's actually something we're delighted to see. I remember recording some conversations with Microsoft a while ago, and I can't exactly the numbers, but they could also see that when people are active in more communities, their overall activity levels go up as well. So it shows that I guess that lots of value to be gotten from Viva Engage. So let me throw you some more interesting, I guess this becomes the conclusion of that part, right, Sharon, that it is actually, I think, based on these numbers, especially around how many people are using Engage, it has become a key enterprise comms channel. So for
Yeah.
those of you that said, like, I think it was like 40-50% that said, yeah, it is, but some people are using it, but not everyone. Maybe that's food for thought.
Yeah, and even in the report, we haven't put it in these slides, Cai, but we also found that more people are seeing the most popular posts as well. And we know participation levels have increased. So it is really showing that there is potential for Viva Engage to be an innovation engine across enterprises because more people are participating. And one of the other really positive findings we found is more people are participating in multiple communities and, as you said, asking more questions. So it does cement Viva Engage as a key enterprise communications channel. But what we need to do is figure out how we can capitalize on this data and this knowledge to improve engagement on Viva Engage. And Cai, I know you have some tips on how to do this.
Yes, exactly. Now, an obvious conclusion about what to do is and then start using Viva Engage if you aren't already. There are still people that get a little bit confused about the different channels and their strengths and weaknesses. So to help you position Viva Engage, we have a set of success guides, Viva Engage success guides, and one of them is called the role of Viva Engage in your internal comms strategy. And if I'm really lucky, we have someone in our team that's going to be posting links to these various success guides in the chat, so you can download them there as well. The common thread amongst all the people we talk to and all the organizations we've profiled in the success guide is that the superpower of Viva Engage is really in its ability to enable open conversation across an organization. And I think it comes from a lot of communicators all around the world. That is the key core differentiator. So check that, read the examples from the success guide. And that will help you position Viva Engage. The next action is to be much more deliberate about starting conversations. I mentioned just before that we've seen this increase in people at mentioning, and that is a very impactful way. It's probably one of the most impactful way you could do. So we've written a guide, a blog post about at mentioning. It's a few years old, but it's a really good one. And there's some really nice examples of how you use the at mention technique to draw people into a conversation. I also wrote a blog post with a UK-based communications expert, Howard Kreis. He's also an author of a new book he's written with a couple of industry peers called Leading the Listening Organization. And in that particular blog post about asking questions, we have a very nice example, I think, about the way you can write something that's more like an announcement, and then how you write in a way where you really are seeking conversation. And when you ask questions that really stimulate conversation. So what I'll also suggest that you really start focusing on is then coaching senior leaders on both at mentioning and asking questions, because it'll have a really big short-term impact. Now, those techniques apply to everyone, but for senior leaders, it really, if you can get them to do this, it really has a massive impact. We also think it's a really good idea to promote your communities. Many of you, I assume, have an intranet. Maybe just give me a like button if you have an intranet. I'm sure there's going to be lots of likes buttons lighting up here. Yes, you know then that Viva Engage and the intranet often go hand in hand. So profile some of those communities on the intranet. Profile the people. Give them a bit of airtime. And then run campaigns that can be cyber awareness campaigns, health and safety, any other topic that's relevant to your organization. So those are just some, I think, with some practical tips you can do right now if you are a little bit sort of in doubt about whether Viva Engage is something for you, because as we found in our benchmarking study, it certainly is for a lot of people. There's something else that I wanted to talk about because Sharon mentioned that it has become this essential part, the comms channel landscape. And we can certainly see that, as you see in the numbers. We can also see that the way it's being used has shifted as corporate communications have taken more ownership of Viva Engage. So in the benchmarking report, we've introduced what we call this dance floor analogy. And we write that it's fantastic that we have more people on the dance floor, but we also have experienced that it seems that people are dancing less. There's less conversations, there's less two-way relationships happening. So I guess what we're saying is that we'd love to see more people, more couples doing the cha-cha, and then maybe a few less of the solo breakdancers performing for the crowd, if you buy into the analogy. So maybe a little bit less broadcasting and more conversations happening. I think that's kind of like our dance floor analogy. And to back that up with some data, we can actually see that the number of people, you can see that people who are replying to post less, 45% replies, and that's down from 49% last year. We have seen reactions going up, like from 84% to 86%. So like you see, that's the more nodding, but fewer conversations. That's a bit like people watching the dancers, but they haven't invited a partner up yet. And also the average number of posts per person have dropped from 2 to less than 1. This is based on a 6 months period. So you see, that's also like that. There's just a lot less dancing happening, but more people on the dance floor, right? So there's more people out there liking and so forth. That just the activity numbers have dropped a bit. So that's, of course, something that we'd like to see changing because we're passionate believers in the value that Viva Engage can bring. We've also seen a slight increase in the broadcaster persona. For those of you that are familiar with SWOOP, you might have heard us talking about the SWOOP personas, which includes broadcasters, observer, and then the more attractive ones around being a responder, a catalyst, or an engager. The broadcaster is the one that are publishing things, they're posting, but they're not getting a lot of reactions or replies back. So that's often when you're putting something out, but it's not really engaging people in conversation. So we've seen that going up a little bit. We've seen a bit of a drop in the engagers, and we've also seen a bit of drop in the two-way relationships going down from 19% roughly to 15%. So you see, this is the data behind the dance floor analogy that we have, remember I said we have more people participating in Viva Engage, but some of these core metrics about how they're interacting with each other, that's deteriorating a little bit. So of course we're a little bit worried about that. We think there are some things that we could be missing out on as a part of, I guess, corporate communication stepping in and taking more of using this as a official communication channel, maybe doing a little bit too much broadcasting, maybe. So I guess some of the sort of summing it up, some of the concerns we can argue that we got to be mindful of, all of us that work in this space, is that we got to be mindful of conversations becoming a bit shallower, the rise of Engage as a broadcasting channel, and just making sure it doesn't take over, because we want to use the superpowers of Viva Engage, right? We want to tap into that power of having two-way conversation. There are lots of other platforms where we can publish communication. So there is a risk of declining employee engagement and knowledge sharing if we're not very careful. But I think, and we have another poll coming up there. So, Sharon, we think that this maybe this isn't just unique to Viva Engage.
Yeah, and it's that whole thing, like, think about it. I'd love you to think about it. Like, is it something people are seeing just on Viva Engage, or think about other platforms, like, and external ones, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram? Is it a case where people are reacting more but replying less? That maybe it is part of this information overload where people are too busy, so they don't reply and get involved in conversations, but they're reacting, and maybe that's an acknowledgement that, yep, I've read it, but I don't have time to get involved in the conversation. So this leads to our next poll. You know, are there less conversations and more reactions happening? Is this something that you're seeing only in Viva Engage, or if you are seeing it in Viva Engage, or you're also seeing it across other platforms like, you know, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, that type of thing as well? So I'll thank you, Fran. So yeah, just to have a think about if you think these behaviours are unique to Viva Engage, or you're seeing them across the trends. So I'm going to get these. Oh, here's the results. It's the same everywhere, including Viva Engage. There you go, 80%. Well, that's pretty clear, isn't it? Although a few people are saying, oh yeah, some only on Viva Engage, and some people think it's they haven't noticed shallower conversations. Well, that is awesome. I'm very pleased to hear there's not everyone's experiencing this, but the majority are on our poll. So Cai, again, you've got some actions that is sure to get some more in-depth conversations happening across your Viva Engage communities, getting people to move past the reactions.
Yes, that's true. So we've got a few for you. So I think I'd start by 3 recommendations for you. First one, and I think I've touched on this, start drawing on Viva Engage's superpower. It is undoubtedly the best tool in the M365 toolbox to enable open, transparent conversations that transcend organizational boundaries. We have published these 7 Viva Engage Success Guide, and they range all the way from building a business case and positioning Engage in the channels mix, to nurturing communities, to getting leaders involved and everyone else, in fact. And then the most recent guide, as Sharon mentioned earlier, we've written about managing information overload with Viva Engage. So that's the first thing. Make sure you tap into those guides. They feature lots of case studies. They're built on our previous benchmarking reports and presentations for the Viva Engage Festival. So they're very practitioner-led. Of course, then with added insights and data that we've gathered through our benchmarking studies. Number 2. Let me just see a hand up. Give a like button. How many of you work in internal communications? Let me give a reaction or like button if you work in internal communications. Yes. All right. Yes. Love and hearts are good as well. Yes. So there's a lot of you that work in internal communication. So this is a little nudge specifically to you. Now, I know you're here because you're not like this. So you're here to learn how to use Viva Engage, and that is excellent. If you have just the slightest bit of an urge to go like, well, Engage, just like anything else, like I could put it on the intranet, I could send an email, I can put it on Engage, it's all the same, isn't it? No, it's not. You know, the way you write for engagement, the way you frame things on Viva Engage, you want to tap into its superpowers. So again, be inspired by the Engage benchmarking, the success guides and the benchmarking reports with all the examples that are in there. And that leads me to the third point: learn from the best. We are featuring organizations, and we did that at the festival. And today, shortly, you're going to hear another great example what we can all learn from. There are really, in every organization, there's always a shining light example of someone who's done it well. They're often profiled in our benchmarking reports, and their story can really bring out it really inspires. So I'm going to hand over to Sharon and then talk us through some of those organizations that we are so excited about being able to profile and have done exceptionally well in this year's benchmarking report.
Let me just go through our champions from this year's benchmarking. So I think one of the best things about our annual benchmarking is identifying the world's top performing Viva Engage enterprise network. So that includes every community from your top performing to your lowest performing communities to come up with an enterprise ranking. And then we also benchmark the top performing communities and rank those as well. So these are our 2025-26 Viva Engage champions. So in number 1 position globally for the top performing network is Australian health performer Medibank. And this is the 2nd year in a row they've been number 1. And in the benchmarking report, we have absolutely fantastic case study from the team at Medibank. It's a must read. Number 2 globally is another APAC winner and another familiar top performer for us, which is Westpac New Zealand. So if Fiona or any of the team from Westpac New Zealand's on the call, congratulations. And number 3 globally is British communications company Quiver. 2 of the top 3 organisations globally were based in our APAC region, but coming in for number 3 for APAC is ANZ. So congratulations to all these winners. But as well as ranking the top performing Viva Engage enterprises, we also did a deep dive analysis into those 5,758 active Viva Engage communities. So these are all communities that are currently active, having some sort of some posts, reactions, that type of thing. This was across the 73 organisations benchmarked, and coming in number 9 globally is another APAC customer, Australia Post. Cai, I'm going to hand over to you to talk about one special guide we have about setting goals for your Viva Engage network.
Absolutely. We have guide number 6 called Goals to Aim For When Using Viva Engage. I hope the QR code otherwise will work. You can bring up your phone, or Emily or Fran will put a link to it. There you go. Fran's already done that and put that in the chat. I wanted to just walk through briefly, because this is one of the reasons why I think a lot of people are interested in what we're doing here at SWOOP Analytics, is the ability to look at some of those, what does good look like? What goals should we aim for? So I'm just going to take you through some of these questions that we very often get and give you some ideas about the answers for that. So we're often being asked, what is a healthy percentage of employees using Viva Engage? I mentioned earlier today that the average is 31.6%. Then when we set the goal, we look at what the top 20%, what have they achieved as an average? So they're like the highest performers. And you can see there the aim to achieve is, we would recommend that you set it at 43%. That is realistic, can be done. You are in the top 20%, so it's ambitious, but yet achievable. The next one I thought would be interesting to have a look at, then is another question we often being asked is, how active should people be? And I remember I talked a bit about this being on the dance floor, like how much that we actually doing the cha-cha and so forth. So again, we always, for benchmarking, we look over a 6-month period, and then we do a very simple activity count. And that's how much you are posting, replying, reacting. That's basically the kind of activities we're looking for. And the average is 21.5, and we've only set the goal a little bit above that, 22. So you can see the top performers, the average of that isn't actually that different from the average here. And that's also, the benefits of looking at all the data that we have available to us. We can sort of tell you roughly at least what does the equivalent of 10,000 steps look like. And we're not saying that, like using that analogy, that everyone have to walk 20 or 10,000 steps per day. We know that there are people that are training for the Olympics, and they are very different to someone like me, who just, needs to go out for a walk every now and then. I'm not I'm not an elite athlete by any stretch of the imagination. But at least you get a sense of like what normal and what good looks like. Another thing we're being asked often about is this thing about ad mentioning, and I mentioned like how important it is. Actually, in this year's report, the numbers were even higher for how much engagement ad mentioning drives. We ended up at you get 200% more replies when you mention someone in a conversation when you're posting than when you don't. 15% was the average, the crude average for how many people are ad mentioning someone, how many posts include an ad mention. We suggest that if you want to be about the top 20%, then you want to drive to 20%. I should point out that this trick, this accelerator, works by far the best when you're posting, not when you're replying. So it's when you make that first post, you're writing it, that's the power, that's where you really get the accelerator of ad mentioning someone that post. Don't worry about it in the reply. That's not going to drive as much engagement as when you're doing it in the post. So try to go for 20%. And as I said, you can refer to some of those blog posts I mentioned about examples of how you can very effectively do that. You might also find, I should maybe just add that if you don't see, like if you're doing lots of ad mentions, but the percentage, the reply rate doesn't improve, then we often see people at mentioning and they might thank 10 people. I might say today, Sylvia, thank you for doing the talk today. And Angie and Brett, thank you very much. You did a great work. Thank you very much. But I'm not inviting you into a conversation by doing that. I'm just like praising you and patting you in the back and saying thank you. A better way for me to use the ad mention would be to say, hey, Angie, like, what did you get out of, and Brett and Sylvia, what did you get out of it today? Or some of the interesting, some of the questions relevant for your presentation, and then I'm tagging you, but I'm also asking a question. So that really stimulates conversation. We also, there is also a risk that we have some people that are incredibly active and really powerful on Viva Engage, and that we could run into this, that there's actually a risk if someone then suddenly leaves. A lot of the time, Viva Engage is about voluntary contribution. It's about showing a passion and having an interest, and if that person goes away, then suddenly the whole thing can fall apart. So we measure that through something called the influence of risk score. The average is 35. We want that to be lower, actually. So the lower that number is, the less at risk we are that an influential person leaves and the whole thing falls apart, particularly in a community. So try to get that down to 19. And there are examples in the report, again, how you try and include other people in the conversation. So it's not just one person or one role that's, like, if you like, that's inadvertently dominating the conversations. Lastly, I talked about the dance floor and whether people are engaging in two-way conversations. That's, we're inviting each other up and we're actually talking to each other, like two-way conversations. And we'd like that to be up at 20% of conversations of relationships that are two-way, and the average is 17.4. So for those of you that are fortunate enough already today to have access to SWOOP Analytics, make sure you go in and change the date range to the last 6 months, and then you can have a look at communities or at your company and then see what the numbers look like. Now,
Thank you for that, Cai. I'm just going to, sorry, I'll just go over, but one of the issues we did hear in our benchmarking report interviews and from listening to all of our customers is that people are feeling overwhelmed with communications, and we've hinted at it during this whole webinar, and it's leading to information overload. So as we were doing this, Cai came up with this idea for an information overload calculator. Cai, over to you if you can explain a little more.
Yeah. I'll do it very briefly. One of the things we realized talking to lots of different organizations was that it doesn't really matter how big the company is. Each person has, like, you can think of it as a time budget, an allowance they have every day as a person to read things that corporate updates and news and so forth. And it doesn't really matter whether you work for an organization of 10 people or 100,000 people. That time budget for a person is about the same. The challenge is that as organizations grow in size, more and more and more people have something that they would like to communicate. There are more corporate functions, more support functions, more management layers, and therefore, with more voices wanting to communicate, there's a real risk that we run into communication to information overload. So we developed this calculator that we hopefully can help you calculate this. You go to swoopanalytics.com/info overload, and I know we can have a link to that in the chat in a moment. You do a little registration form, but you can rest assured that none of the data you're actually putting in here is actually, other than we know who's logging on, we're not storing any information in a way that can be attributed to any individual person. So it's all totally anonymous. But you really just fill in three simple steps. Step 1, step 2, step 3. You put in something about your company, the size of it. I'm just going to add some sample data in here. There's how many employees you have, how many managers, what comms channels you have. It's very simple to do. You put in content types. This is basically where you put in the different kind of news, articles, whatever you publish, how many they're supposed to read, how often you're doing it, and how long time it takes to read it, each of those things you're sending out. And you can almost now see that then you can start to calculate, well, how much bandwidth would we be consuming if people were to read all of this? And then the last bit of it, we then say, well, how much time do we think that people actually have available for this? And I load some sample data, and you can put in whatever number you think is realistic for your organization. We pre-feed it with 15 minutes. So you can do the same just for fun, fill this in. You calculate your information overload. It's thinking for a little bit, and then it's calculating just like how much at risk you are for information overload. And I think what's really interesting, it's actually putting, because you can put in an hourly rate for a person and how many hours they work per week, you can actually start to put a cost of how much reading time, like what is the cost of the reading time. And we think that's important. And I'm going to scroll in here because we believe that the role of internal communications is so important in making sure that what's being sent out is the right messages to the right people at the right time. And the role you play in vetting quality, scheduling messages like the content calendar that Sylvia put up, ensuring that the messages don't collide, that everything is aligned to outcomes and tracking these messages, whether they land. That's actually important because if you look at the amount of time required to read this, it's actually typically quite a substantial amount of money that's at stake. And we think that internal comms plays such a critical role in this, that we want to help you put a dollar value on that so you can go back to your bosses and then say, what we do really, really matters, because we want to make sure that these messages land, that they align, and they support business outcomes.